everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of the Healthy Aging podcast. We are super excited about the guest that we're going to be speaking to today. And Susie, could you give our lovely guest an introduction, please?
Yes, of course I can. I'm very excited to introduce this guest to our podcast today because this is actually one of my business mentors within Nu Skin. So we've mentioned before that Lorraine and I are partnered with a company called Nu Skin, and Dan McCormick, who is our guest today, has been with Nu Skin for many, many years, and he is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to business. However, he is also a wealth of knowledge when it comes to healthy aging, specifically mindset. Now, it's interesting because we've got our 4 pillars that we talk about. You know, we talk about mindset, nutrition, skincare, and exercise. And Dan is an expert in all 4 of these. So it was difficult to decide, right, where exactly do we bring Dan in? And we decided this was a great time to bring Dan in. One, because he has literally worked on self-development from a very, very young age. So he has so much knowledge on it. He has his own podcast as well, which we're going to talk a little bit about. But after this episode, we then move on to the nutrition side of our podcast, and Dan has got lots of knowledge there as well. So he will actually share some knowledge on nutrition today as well, hopefully. But one of the greatest things I love about this gentleman is the fact that not only has he been a great business mentor to me, that he has taught me to be a better human being. And every single day I wake up wondering how I can be a better human being. And that is because of the teachings that I've had from this incredible man. And it's a real honour to have him on our podcast today. So Lorraine, I'm going to go back to you for you to ask the question that we always ask, which we actually borrowed from Dan's podcast, kind of, didn't we? So I'll let you ask that question.
Thank you so much. What a lovely introduction. And yep, we are so delighted to have you on today, Dan. And yep, as I said earlier, you find a winning formula and stick with it. So that's what we did. We loved the way that you start your podcast, and we decided to borrow it, and we would go along with that as well. So we always start the podcast in the same way, and that is by asking our guests what their top 3 tips for healthy aging would be.
So that's a really great question. And I hope I can answer this in a way that's unique for your podcast, because at the age of 12, I got a job at a tennis and racket club in Seattle, Washington. And I remember going there, and my diet was horrible. I was a disaster. I mean, as a kid, it was when I bought something out of the vending machine and it was that quarter or 50 cents, when I was choosing my candy bar, I would choose it by weight, and I would look at it and say, if I could get 2.2 ounces is better value than 1.7 ounces for my quarter or 50 cents. Because I just ate junk all the time. I didn't know what it was like or what it meant to eat something good. And so years go by, and this lady shows up on a Saturday morning. I'll never forget it. Here I am, this young teenager, and she's making protein smoothies for the members that day. And I even remember the name of the brand. It was like 1979, probably 678. And she made a protein smoothie, and it had an impact on me. And it made an impact on my mind. And I remember having a cold sore growing up in that damp, dry, that damp air of Seattle. I had this cold sore that wouldn't go away. And so I remember I must have been 16 years of age because I drove into a health food store, and they told me to get this vitamin B complex. And my cold sore went away in like a day and a half, 2 days. And so I started thinking, wow, I said, maybe there is something to this eating better and taking care of your body. And lo and behold, so my number one thing is, first of all, for healthy eating, eat what works for you. Because what works for you doesn't work for everybody else. There's certain things that I can't eat in my diet. If I eat certain things, I know my stomach's not going to be happy. And so you just have to eat what works for you. And I know what works for me, and I know what to eat on how to be the cleanest I can be. And generally, it's going to be a very low gluten diet for me. If I eat a lot of gluten, I'm going to pay for it, and in achiness and joint pain. And I know that you have to just, number one, find out what works for you. if I eat something that's very rich in antioxidants, if it's smoothie based and it avoids dairy, and I avoid, soy and other things that affect my stomach, you just have to find out what works for you. And what works for me is sticking to my clean diet. So my number one favorite thing in terms of a unique thing that not everybody eats every day, but I try to do it every day. And I have many different forms of ginger. And I just think ginger for me is fantastic. So I drink multiple different kinds of beverages with ginger in it. I take raw ginger and put it in my smoothies. And I just love ginger. So number one for me is do what's right for you. And number two is I try to get an abundance of anti-inflammatory nutrients. Okay. So I try to do purple corn, and I try to do, resveratrol, and I do a lot of things that really have a profound impact on inflammation in my body. And those are products that, of course, I notice and make a difference for me. So I research that kind of thing, and I'm really, really high on any type of antioxidant and or other nutrients that have anti-inflammatory, your essential fatty acids and things like that that'll make a difference. And so eat what's right for your body. Okay. There was a book written years ago called Eat Right for Your Blood Type, and my immunologist is very high on that. So that's one. Two, a lot of antioxidants, vitamins and supplements, whether it's tea green or reishi or something that I call AIE10, which is my number one favorite nutrient in the world. And then finally, it's what Susie introduced me based on, which is the mindset. And this is critical, because whether I shake your hand or give you a hug or a kiss on the cheek or an embrace of any kind, I never fear what the other person might be carrying. I don't fear it. My mindset is that my body is getting what it needs every day to be strong and healthy. I prepare with, Susie, I hope I'm not jumping ahead here, but I prepare with breathing, and we'll talk more about that later. And I prepare with a steam bath almost every day. So I do steam, breathing, exercise, some degree of yoga, nutrition. So it's just really a holistic mindset. It's everything about what I do from the day I ate my last brown sugar sandwich as a kid, because that's how bad my diet was.
Brown sugar sandwich. Now that sounds awful.
Yeah.
It's Scottish, isn't it?
Yeah, that's actually a really
Imagine,
Scottish
Susie,
thing, Dan.
white bread with butter and brown sugar. That was my favorite sandwich.
Yeah, honestly, there will be children in Scotland that will still eat that we put everything onto a sandwich. So yeah, that's interesting. And I didn't mention the fact that you're American and that you're joining us from, and now are you in California today, or are
I'm
you
in Idaho.
You're in Idaho just now.
I'm up north near the border of Canada and the United States in northern Idaho. Yeah.
Beautiful. And you have recently spent a week or 2 weeks with all your grandchildren?
Yeah. Yeah. My wife and I, we have 4 married daughters and 12 grandkids and 2 more on the way. And they were all here for all of the McCormick Olympics, we called it. We got little gold medals for all the grandkids, and we had great memories, and they'll talk about it for the entire year until they come back next year. So it's a lot of fun to create memories. It's the number one thing in the world you can do with your time and with any good fortune you're blessed with financially, is that's create memories.
Amazing. And I love as well, you're a granddaddy, 12 grandchildren, 2 on the way, so that you will soon be 14. And yet you're as fit and as active and as healthy, maybe even more so today than you were as a father, probably. I didn't know you as a father, I'm just assuming, but seeing the time and effort and energy that you put into your routines, your mindset, your breathing. I'm really interested in the steam, because I know that when we look at, certainly when it comes to breathing, I know that you're a big follower of Wim Hof. And again, it's one of the reasons why I started to read Wim Hof's materials because, if Dan McCormick's doing it, I'm going to do it. And of course, he talks a lot about breathing, but he talks about the ice rather than steam. So tell us, I'd like to explore about what's the steam all about?
So I just know that for me, okay, cold is torture. It's just torture for me. Heat is heavenly for me. So a steam bath, obviously you're sweating things out, you're taking out impurities. So I like infrared saunas. I do a lot of infrared saunas. I work out in an infrared sauna, and then I'll do the steam bath in my shower, and I'll just sit there, and whether I'm sitting there with my mud mask on, Susie, or if I'm sitting there just breathing or just pondering, it's just one more thing to help the entire body, the immune system. And it's a complex system in the body, the immune system. And you have to find what works for you. And that's what works for me. My body, my joints, everything feels better when I use infrared saunas and I use my steam bath. I just like it. I'm fired up about it because I personally feel at the age of 58 right now that, knock on wood, which I have right here, my immune system is better than it's ever been. I really feel in the last 2 years, I can hardly even remember a sore throat, which is common when the temperature changes from 70s, 80s, 90s, and 100. We had a high of 115 in northern Idaho this year, very hot. And then I get down into, we had the other night, it was just 40. So, when things change, I often growing up and throughout my adult would get sore throats in the morning. And with all of those things that I do, I can hardly remember a sore throat or a sniffle.
Yeah, I like to say as well, touch wood, I'm very much the same. I don't get unwell. And I do believe it is because of how well I look after my body and my mind. And I have an absolute focus on healthy aging. So Lorraine, I need to ask you, what are you? Are you steam or are you ice?
Well, let me just show you actually. So, definitely personal preference would be steam. However,
there you go.
Just purchased the book. So I have actually been having a wee bit of a cold shower in the morning. So just having my normal shower and then turning it on to cold, and just kind of trying to build it up a wee bit. So I think it's a bit of an easier way to get started on it because you've already got quite a lot of heat in your body apparently, so it's easier to take the colds. But it's not as bad as I thought it would be. I wasn't looking forward to doing it, but I thought in the interest of healthy aging, I'll give it a try.
Well done you. For people that are listening to the podcast, Lorraine just held up the Wim Hof method book, so congratulations to you.
I'll keep you posted.
Yeah, I'm kind of like that as well, by the way. I will take my normal shower and end with it on cold. And I know that, my body can run hot and I try to cool it down as well. And so, yeah, I try. It's just that, it's cold is not my favorite friend yet.
Yeah, it is amazing though, when this is the kind of the first I've ever heard of the benefits of cold water and what it can do for your capillaries and your heart strength and all of that kind of stuff. So it's absolutely fascinating.
The mind. I'm a real big fan of My Octopus Teacher. If you've seen that documentary, same thing where he walks into the waters of South Africa every day for a year and documents it. So fascinating to study the benefits of cold for sure, and breathing.
Yeah.
So Lorraine, will we go on to talking about breathing then?
Yeah.
Because we haven't really covered much of that, have we, so far on the podcast? It's
very interesting because everyone we've had speaking about mindset has spoken about it, but we haven't actually delved into it with anyone. So yes, I think that would be an excellent topic to get into with Dan.
So Dan, tell us about how long have you been doing breath work for?
So it was, I want to say it was a year and a half or so ago when I was watching an old podcast of Laird Hamilton, and the big wave surfer, the famous big wave surfer, Hawaii, California, wherever he's at now. He was asked the question, what do you think it takes to be a great big wave surfer? And his answer was preparation. dedicated to preparation. And one of my mantras in life is that this life is a time to prepare to meet God. And so I took his analogy on how he's got 10 to 12 great days a year of surfing. And we can take that analogy to any athletic event, business events, investments, and there's crescendos in life. And then there's other cycles where you can't live in crescendo all the time. And so he has this rhythm to his life where he spends first thing for him, make the bed, create a win right away, like the military. First thing, wake up, make the bed. Me, make the bed, pray, and meditate, read, cold shower, hydrate, and then he breathes for 90 minutes. So I only do the 11-minute version because I have a form of ADD. So after 11 minutes of breathing, I feel so great. I mean, it's just great for me. I love the feeling. And I remember the first time I did, I don't think I could hold my breath for 30 seconds. And then it got to 45, and then it got to a minute, and then it got to a minute and a half, and then it got to a minute and 45, up to 2. And then Laird Hamilton in the same interview, he was asked, if I recall, what's the longest period of time you can hold your breath? And he said, well, I hope I never have to find out. Because if you're going under those waves, right? But he said he's done up to 5 minutes. Wow. So that's pretty crazy. I mean, I think I've maxed it close to 2. And that's amazing for me, right? So I really got into that because of Laird Hamilton, because of watching his podcasts and watching him on different events talk about Wim. And that was my introduction to it. So probably 18 months or so.
And what's the biggest thing that he said? I don't know if you remember, Dan, but what's his reason for the breath work? Like, why does he want to do that?
So, his life is just dedicated to the big wave. So, excuse me. So anything he can do to get his mind, get his heart rate, get his rhythm, and everything has a reason for what he's doing because he's Laird Hamilton. And for me, it's as simple as I want to be able to function optimally. I know that it has an incredible benefit on my body. That's my own personal view of it. Has an incredible benefit to me on the golf course. I love to golf. And if you even watch Phil Mickelson, who's the oldest person ever to win the PGA Championship this year, he has an entire new rhythm to his life on how he breathes before he hits a golf shot. And, they're chewing the CBD gum on PGA Tour now to help try to calm them because everything's about being more calm. Because obviously, if we live in a state of flight or fight, obviously our immune system, there's all kinds of activation points and stressors. And so everything about breathing is trying to get it more relaxed and more calm. And the reason for me it's big is I'm an adrenaline junkie. You've seen me on stage. I love the energy. My voice gets high. I hold my oxygen up here in my chest and I want to breathe deeper and be a little more calm. And I'm an adrenaline junkie my entire life. And so it really has helped ground me to a certain point. And so I'm just grateful that you were so kind to send me this book because I love it. And I know that my entire makeup of my jaw, face, cheekbones, etc., is not exactly as perfect as James Nestor documents in this book, Breath, which you sent me. And I had watched some of his documentaries, some of his podcasts. It is, I believe, a lost art, a lost science to be able to do that breath work. And so it's fascinating to think about what he documents in that books, whether from your immune system to getting cavities, right? To allergies, to sleep. It's just fascinating. So it's one more thing that's new to my repertoire, if you will, in the last 18 months. And that's just being more cognizant and aware of how I breathe. Where's my tongue when I breathe? Because previous to this, I was a big snorer. And so I'm trying to breathe more through my nose, tongue against the roof of the mouth. So you create more heat, more nitric oxide, and things change. And so the book is brilliant. His documentation is brilliant. And it's his personal story. And that's what's so great about it. We're all, from the very first words of the Bible, it's about a personal story. And it's a lot of people's life stories. And isn't that really all that we're here to do, is just tell a story on your podcast about maybe one idea that can be life-changing for somebody, whether it's breath, whether it's ginger, whether it's AIE 10, whether it's mindset, whatever, knowing that you have everything stacked in your favor to be as healthy as you can all the time. Because I sat next to my father, and all of us have had loved ones or friends that have gone through tough times. And to see my dad be diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and gone in 1 month, it's just like not where you want to go. I mean, you go to those hospitals and you see what they're hooked up to and all of those things that, you know, we want optimal life. And that's really what we're trying to do here on your podcast, I suppose, is educate to some point about what is that one idea for someone that might listen to this today, 6 months or 6 years from now on your podcast and say, wow, what if I just added ginger to my diet or my smoothies? Or what if I added steam baths or infrared or breathing? You never know what that one idea is for somebody that can be life-changing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I need to ask you a question, because I've never asked anybody this before, because we've never spoke a lot about the breathing. But I started doing Wim Hof's technique, and as you said, it's about holding your breath for a period of time. And I was the same, Dan. I couldn't even do 30 seconds. I've now got it to a minute and a half, but I still don't always achieve a minute and a half. You know, it's only sometimes. But the times that I don't achieve it, I more don't achieve it than do achieve it. I'm really aware that my mind is just talking to me all the way through it. Like my mind's going, oh, I wonder if we're nearly at a minute 30. I wonder if we're nearly at a minute 30. And I'm like, just keep holding on, just keep holding on. And so I'm just constantly talking to myself, but I feel that I'm not talking to myself very positively. But when I actually just am able to quiet the mind and just lie there, I always achieve it. So I don't know if you have, and I don't even know how I manage to quieten the mind. It just happens sometimes where, you know, Wim Hof will say on because I do it on YouTube, he'll say, take a deep breath in, and I'm thinking, oh, I've done a minute and 30 seconds. How did I do that? Because I wasn't thinking. But it's very seldom I can get there. So for you, do you have a special technique in how you can hold your breath for a certain period of time, or is it just that it's been practice for you?
Yes, but like I say, it's like going back to my original comment about diet. You know, you got to do what works for you. And so what I found that what works for me on the 11 minutes, do you do the 11-minute segment with him on YouTube?
I do. Yep, that's the one I do.
So when he says these words, it's if I'm keyed in on these words, it just works for me. And sometimes I'm not. But when he says, let the body do what the body does. And when I get deeply into that, holding my breath for a minute or 90 seconds, it seems like it's pretty easy. But if my mind is somewhere else or doesn't stay focused, like you said, but what I've learned to do is be okay with wherever I'm at. So if I only got 30 seconds, I'm okay with that. If I get a minute, I'm okay with that. And what I also like to do is I like to visualize me laying on my favorite beaches of the world and listening to the ocean, you know, the waves, and just being in that real relaxed state. And that's just what works for me. So hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, no, that's great, because I've never done that. I've never took myself to my relaxation place or my happy place. So so that definitely works for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I am going to, if it's okay, just change it up a little bit and just ask you, Dan, to tell us a little bit about your weekly podcast, because it is a real, I listen to a lot of podcasts and this is a real favourite of mine. So if you wouldn't mind sharing with our listeners about that.
So as years ago, I was a 19-year-old young man when I first met a man named Larry. And my wife had sponsored him into the company that we met in, and his life was horrible. Spiraled out of control, downhill. He was just looking forward to being broke. He was $53,000 in debt. This was 1980, 81. And he went out in the garage one day and he was moving some boxes around. And this is at a very deep, dark time in their life. A wife, 2 kids that didn't move when the phone rang. And the reason they didn't move is because it was bill collectors. And one day, Larry's kicking boxes around in the garage. He's got books and he's moving them. And he sees all these old tapes, cassette tapes, positive thinking stuff. And he picks up that magical book by Og Mandino called The Greatest Salesman in the World. And so lo and behold, he read that book. And 1 week later, he met my wife. 90 days later, after telling his kids that, look, kids, if you let me sell the 10-speed bikes and the color TV, I'll take you guys to Hawaii for Christmas. And this is in February, March-ish. And lo and behold, he picked up that book. He started reading that book and his life changed. And he called my wife. They met in business. He went on to make $75,000 his next 90 days. And then I was fortunate to meet him in a parking lot in Seattle, Washington at 19. And he told me about this book. Now, I was not a reader. And I was somebody that finished college in 2 weeks to tell you how good at school I was. And now that doesn't mean that I got a degree. That means I was finished. Okay. Most people call that dropping out. Okay. But I wasn't dropping out of life. I just didn't know that I was turning a page because I wasn't mature enough and I wasn't dedicated enough to reading as a young man. And I think that's one of the great skills that any young person can learn is to read, to touch a book, to write in the margins, to have dog-eared pages, because it changes the brain. If you read Craig Case's book, fantastic read, and the book is escaping me right now, but Craig's book is about the value of journaling and how things change when we write in our journals, in our brain. There's something that changes, right? And so he gives me this book, The Greatest Salesman in the World. He had then The Greatest Secret in the World, which is the journalized version. And that book was written in 1968, presented at the Amway Corporation. Rich DeVos, the founder of Amway, stands on stage in 1968, says everyone should read this book. Long story short, it's this beautiful parable about young Hafid in Israel. And you have a Jew, you have a Muslim, you have Caucasian, you have all the different pieces to the story. And lo and behold, his mentor in the story finally gives him the 10 scrolls. And those scrolls are basically how to make your life better. Now, for me, it was casual the first month I did it. I knew it was important, but I was such a poor student. I was such a poor reader. I had such lousy self-esteem. I had horrible self-image. I certainly had no net worth at 19. And I failed. And that was painful because I failed at a lot of things when it came to academic curriculum. I knew that I had a learning disability. This probably would have been diagnosed back in the 70s as ADD or ADHD. I don't know what they would. I mean, if you eat brown sugar sandwiches for lunch, you're going to have something. So I couldn't concentrate. It was awful. But finally, I met my wife in August of 82, I think. We were married in May of 83. And she read all of Og Mandino's books. Her dad had every book. He had a library. He had a book club. And I learned that readers were leaders. And I learned that for things to change, I needed to change. And that became very real to me. I knew I wasn't going to get a do-over in life. I watched it be painful for my brother and I, raised in a single parent home. And so I dedicated myself. I wanted to be married young. I wanted to have a young family. I wanted to be a part of their lives. And believe you me, I have so many flaws. It's unbelievable. I mean, I am still working on them every single day at 5 a.m. But that book set me on a course along with other books and magnificent books. But that's what started my journey in those scrolls. And scroll number 2 simply says, based on Og's paradigm now, remember, for those that don't know the Og Mandino story, he was an alcoholic. His life was a living hell for 10 years. Those are his words, not mine. And so when he became the editor-in-chief of Success Magazine, that was his first book. It was the first book that I really read as a self-help book. And it was transformative for me to read the following words in scroll number 2. I will greet this day with love in my heart. Muscle can split a shield and even destroy life, but only the unseen power of love can open the hearts of men and women. And until I master this art, I will remain no more than a peddler in the marketplace. I will greet this day with love in my heart. So that scroll goes on for 2.5, 3 pages. It takes 6, 7, 8, 10 minutes, depending on how fast you read and how slow you want to do it. So that was a 19-year-old life-changing event for me from the mindset perspective. When I started my journey 19 and a half years ago, it would have been May 19 years ago, in my current company, New Skin Enterprises, I started we'll call it a podcast. It was then a conference call that became a Facebook Live, that was Blog Talk Radio. Numerous different iterations of technology have changed the way we communicate. And for 19 years running today, the day we're taping this podcast, 19 years today, I have been live every Saturday morning talking about principles, habits, and reference points. And I just want to be a reminder voice for anyone on the journey that they can do it. And I want to remind them of principles, habits, and the reference point is the reminder. It's the reference point to say, hey, we just got to, the old adage that says it takes a village to raise a child, right? It can't just be the parents. It starts in the parents, it starts in the home. But if you have a village of surrounding yourself with good people and quality service projects and contributions, great things can happen. So to answer your question, this man named Dave Blanchard called me, the owner now of the Og Mandino company. Og passed away years ago. And he asked me if I'd be willing to succumb to a then faxed version, okay, of an assessment of how I think. Not what I think, but how I think. And he began to teach me deeper meanings to each of the scrolls. And it became very real for me because, again, I have a lot of flaws. I have a lot of hiccups from the upbringing as a young child and not being a student and a horrible diet, all those things. And so he became, in a sense, my Og Mandino mentor for this day and age, my friend who taught me, and he assessed through his science of axiology and millions and millions and hundreds of millions of possibilities of how this assessment could help me understand of what I was thinking on my internal world and how I was projecting on the external world. And so Susie will remember when I came to Scotland a few years ago that, one of my favorite things to do is to shake the hand of every person in the audience. It's fun to take a picture with every person, shake their hand, say hello. So my external world, I try to always be with the people. And I don't just try to be the guy on the stage. And I've met very famous people, very rich, very famous people, that when I go introduce myself to them on stage and thank them and congratulate them, it's the least interesting thing to them to get into the audience and meet the people. It's the most interesting thing to me. And so I asked the Og Mandino company a year and a half ago if I could start a podcast that was called The Greatest Salesman. And so here's a couple of my journals for every one of those interviews on what those 3 things are. And it's fascinating to me because everybody's got 3 things that are life-changing to them. Everybody's got, I'll just never forget this amazing entrepreneur coming on and sharing that the first of her 3 things was creativity. And there was a whole story about her life and why creativity was so real. And so I've done 42, 3, 4 podcasts, and it was amazing. I'm not sure we'll get back to it. We took the summer off, and my summer was so filled with kids and activities, I just wasn't able to do it. And so it's been an amazing journey. It's called The Greatest Salesman. You can find it on Facebook. You can find it it on YouTube. You can find it on all those other podcast sites. The interviews are riveting.
Yeah, they really, really are. And I mean, just, if anyone's joining us that's part of New Skin, they'll know that you have a hugely, hugely successful business there. And the podcast was all about speaking to people who have huge success in their area of life, whatever that may be. Did you find, Dan, that there was anything similar? They always say success leaves clues, don't they? So when you were speaking with all of these hugely successful people, were there kind of similar traits, or were any of those three things, was there any pattern to that at all?
Yeah, there was and there wasn't, because everybody's story is theirs, and there was some common threads. I thought about doing a study on it, but I haven't. There was oftentimes people that let me give it a broader brushstroke if I could. And I'll just use one word, and it's gratitude. They said it a million different ways, okay? Or 3 different ways, 42 times, 43 times, okay? But that's the overarching word. Whether it was gratitude for their parents, their mentors, their books, whatever it was. But I'd say the overarching word would be gratitude.
And we've heard that a lot on this as well, haven't we, Lorraine? I mean, we're just at the early stages of our podcast. And when we ask people, like, what's the 3 things for healthy aging, on a mindset point of view, we've had gratitude a lot. It is that thing of being grateful for the body that you have, being grateful for the mind that you have, being grateful for being able to eat all this clean food, all these different things that we can be grateful for. And it's just been brilliant. And it's interesting because the book, The Greatest Salesman, and you talk about it all the time on your podcast, it's not actually about sales. Yeah. It's, and I actually remember our dear friend, Dr. Peter Levy, telling me to get that book when I joined my New Skin journey. And I remember absolutely like so much barriers going up, thinking, I am not going to read that book. I am not a salesperson. There's no way I'm going to read it. And he's like, be coachable, Susie, you're going to read that book. And I still remember where I was when it's scroll number 2 for me. I was in Nepal doing I used to be a massage therapist. I was teaching blind people how to massage. I was living with the locals in Nepal, and morning, noon and night, I was reading my scrolls. I will greet this day with love in my heart. And I would walk out the apartment that I was living in through the streets, and everybody I passed, I'm looking at them going, I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. And there's a lot of people in Nepal. It was like, I love you. I love you. I love you. You. Oh, I love you. And I just constantly kept saying it. And then I would start laughing, thinking, you're telling people that you don't even know that you love them. That's crazy. But then the more and more work you do around personal development and growth and love, you understand that you do not need to know another person to be able to love that person. And actually, love is one of the greatest things that we have. And if we never experience love, then that is something that we're not going to be able to survive. So actually, when we talk about healthy aging, and we just talk about aging, love is one of those words that is so huge when it comes to how we age, because without love, what do we have?
There is solutions to every problem through love and kindness. One of my great mentors, Stephen Covey, my wife had as a professor in college, wrote the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I remember a friend of mine going in and talking to Stephen, and maybe didn't have some nice things to say about a mutual friend that they had, somebody that had a rocky patch in their life. And all of the people in this story are icons at the highest level of humanity and self-development and contribution and service and love. And as this one friend said to Stephen, something along the lines of, I really got a problem with so-and-so. And Stephen Covey basically said, just love him for who he is. And, it's just like one of my greatest favorite lines in the world from one of my greatest mentors, spiritual teachers, Dieter F. Uchtdorf from Germany. And Dieter Uchtdorf one time said, "Don't judge me because my sins are different than yours."
That's powerful.
I mean, it's unbelievable if you think about it.
Yeah. Really powerful.
Yeah.
Well,
What an
Dan,
honor to be with you.
I hate to say that we're coming to the end. We could speak and speak and speak, I'm sure. But as we start the podcast the same way, we always end the podcast the same way. And that is by asking if you had one tip, something that people could go and implement in their life right now that would help them towards healthy aging, what would that one thing be?
You know, it's a really great question. And I think it comes back to beginning with the end in mind. And if you do that, like I remember one of my great friends on my podcast in January of last year, Nathan Ricks, I remember being with him on so many occasions. And if there was something to eat that wasn't healthy for the body, I just remember him saying, "It's never worth it." And I mean, I'm not perfect. I had a cherry milkshake this summer up at the pool, and I know that it was loaded with sugar and dairy and all kinds of things, and I absolutely loved it. It was divine and delicious. But if I did it every day, it would be painful for my stomach and for, you know, just my everything I believe on how I want to feel physically, right? My awareness and whatever. So I think begin with the end in mind. If you're going to go to the supermarket today and do your grocery shopping, begin with the end in mind. What do you really want? Do you want health? Do you want clarity? Do you want pain-free? You know, begin with the end in mind. If you're constantly buying all of the things that add to the problem of breaking down the immune system or making the scale go higher, then you're not beginning with the end in mind, right? So be proactive. Stephen Covey taught it best. Be proactive. Habit number one. Begin with the end in mind, and you'll make good selections and good decisions.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Dan. I would actually love to speak much more about the nutrition side. So we'll maybe need to get you onto another podcast when we're talking about that side as well. And we're going to have our good friend Peggy Crock on one day to talk about the nutrition side, and certainly from our company's point of view, because we know that we have got such phenomenal solutions, or would that be the right word, for people when it comes to their health and wellness. And certainly I'm looking forward to exploring more about our biophotonic scanner as well. I love that device, and I cannot wait to be able to share that device with our listeners and tell them what it does and how powerful that is. So yeah, like Lorraine says, we could sit and speak to you all day and get so much of your knowledge. I'm super grateful for your mentorship, for your friendship. Thank you so much for everything that you do for me, my family, my New Skin family. Like, from the bottom of my heart, I am super grateful. So thank you, and thank you for your time today as well. We appreciate that. For people listening in to the podcast, remember you can find us on Spotify. That's the main place you'll find us, just under Healthy Aging. You'll find us on Instagram, Healthy Aging Podcast, and you will find us on Facebook as well. We have a Facebook group called Healthy Aging Podcast. We've got the YouTube channel. We much prefer to listen rather than watch. However, if you want to see our lovely faces, jump onto YouTube and you'll see us there as well under Healthy Aging Podcast on YouTube. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. Next week, we will be changing focus, where we will be talking about nutrition. So you're going to hear my views on nutrition. You're going to hear Lorraine's views on nutrition. And then we're going to start going in and interviewing some incredible people in the field of nutrition. So thanks again for tuning in, and have a wonderful week, everybody.
Thank you.